The silence before violence has its own texture, thick, suffocating, pregnant with malice. Sarah Martinez felt it pressing against her chest as three shadows emerged from the narrow gaps between downtown office buildings, their footsteps echoing off wet concrete like a countdown to catastrophe. Her designer heels clicked frantically against the pavement as she clutched her briefcase tighter, the weight of a 12-hour board meeting suddenly insignificant compared to the weight of fear settling in her stomach. Just 20 minutes earlier, she had been the commanding presence in Sterling Corporation's boardroom, her voice cutting through corporate doubts like a blade through silk. Now, with her back pressed against cold brick and three strangers forming a semicircle around her, Sarah Martinez, CEO, mother of two, daughter of immigrants who had scraped pennies to send her to college, felt smaller than she had in 20 years. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the distant hum of traffic from the main street that suddenly felt 1,000 miles away. "Just take my purse. Take whatever you want." The tallest of the three men stepped closer, his smile revealing teeth that caught the sickly yellow glow of a flickering streetlight. "Oh, we will," he said, his words dripping with an intention that made Sarah's blood run cold. 60 feet away, through a fourth-floor window of the Sterling building, Miguel Santos was emptying another executive's trash can when movement in the alley below caught his eye. For a moment, he stood frozen, the plastic liner dangling from his weathered hands as he processed what he was seeing. 23 years of night shifts had taught him to recognize trouble, and this was trouble of the worst kind. "Papa, what's wrong?" His daughter Elena looked up from her homework spread across a small table Miguel had set up in the corner of the office. At 14, she possessed the kind of sharp intelligence that could cut through pretense and the observational skills of someone who had learned to read her father's moods like weather patterns. "Stay there, mija," Miguel whispered, though his voice carried an urgency that made Elena's pencil freeze mid-calculation. He pressed his face closer to the glass, his calloused palms leaving prints as he tried to get a better view of the scene unfolding below. The woman, he recognized her now as Ms. Martinez, the CEO who always said, "Good evening," when she passed him in the hallways, who had once stopped to ask about Elena's science fair project, was trapped. The three men were closing in like wolves, their body language screaming predation. Miguel's mind raced through options with the speed of someone who had survived poverty, discrimination, and single parenthood through quick thinking and decisive action. Call 911. His phone was in his bag 2 rooms away, and by the time police arrived, he couldn't finish the thought. Run downstairs. The building's security system would trap him in the elevator for 30 seconds, and another minute to reach the alley. Too long. "Papa." Elena had moved to the window, her homework forgotten. She was tall for her age, with arms strengthened by years of playing softball in the local league Miguel could barely afford. Her eyes, dark and serious, assessed the situation with an intelligence that sometimes startled him. "Is that lady in trouble?" Miguel nodded grimly. "Yes, baby, and I don't know how to." "The window," Elena interrupted, her voice steady despite the gravity of what they were witnessing. "It opens, right, and I have perfect aim." For a moment, Miguel didn't understand. Then he saw what Elena was looking at, her softball, signed by her favorite player, sitting on the windowsill where she'd placed it earlier while showing him her batting average calculations. The same ball she'd used just last weekend to strike out 3 players in a row. The same ball that had earned her the nickname, Lightning, from her teammates. "Mija, no, it's too dangerous. If you miss, I won't miss." Elena's confidence wasn't arrogance, it was the quiet certainty of someone who had spent countless hours perfecting her craft, who understood the physics of trajectory and the weight of responsibility. 4 floors down, wind from the east at maybe 5 miles per hour. "I've made harder throws." In the alley below, Sarah's world was shrinking to the space between her back and the brick wall. The men were discussing something in low voices, their words indistinct but their intent clear. She thought of her children, probably finishing dinner at home, wondering why mommy was late again. She thought of her parents, who had worked double shifts at a factory so she could have opportunities they never dreamed of. She thought of all the employees counting on her leadership, all the decisions waiting on her desk upstairs. "Please," she tried again, her voice stronger now, carrying the authority that had built a career. "I have a family. I have people who depend on me." The tallest man laughed, A sound like broken glass. Don't we all, sweetheart? 4 floors above, Elena was calculating angles with the precision of a mathematician and the instinct of an athlete. She hefted the softball in her right hand, feeling its familiar weight, the slight roughness of the worn leather against her palm. This wasn't about perfect form or impressing coaches. This was about being the person her father had raised her to be, someone who acted when action was needed. If I throw this and hit one of them, she said quietly, it'll create confusion. Maybe give her a chance to run. Miguel looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the child he tucked into bed each night, but the young woman she was becoming. Strong, brave, unwilling to stand by while someone suffered. His heart swelled with pride even as it ached with worry. One throw, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of fatherhood and trust. Make it count. Elena opened the window with steady hands. The sounds of the city rushed in, distant sirens, car engines, the low murmur of nightlife from streets that suddenly seemed impossibly far away. She drew back her arm, the motion as natural as breathing, honed by countless hours of practice and an innate understanding of physics that had impressed her teachers since elementary school. Below, Sarah heard footsteps approaching and closed her eyes, whispering a prayer her grandmother had taught her in Spanish, words that carried the weight of generations who had faced impossible odds with dignity. Elena's throw was perfect. The softball cut through the humid night air like a comet, following a trajectory calculated by intuition and executed with precision that would have made her coach weep with pride. It struck the tallest attacker square in the shoulder blade with enough force to send him stumbling forward into his companions. What the hell? One of them shouted, spinning around as the softball bounced and rolled into a puddle with a splash that seemed to echo in the sudden chaos. Sarah didn't hesitate. The moment her attacker's attention shifted, she bolted, her expensive heels clicking against pavement as she ran toward the street with speed born of desperation and hope. Behind her, she could hear confused shouts, the sound of men trying to regroup and figure out what had happened. She didn't stop running until she reached the security guard at the front of her building, her chest heaving, her carefully styled hair disheveled, her hands shaking as she tried to explain what had happened. Within minutes, police cars were flooding the area, their lights painting the alley in alternating blues and reds. The 3 men were gone, vanished into the urban maze like the predators they were, but Sarah was safe. Alive, whole. An hour later, after giving her statement to police and calling her family, Sarah stood in the elevator heading to the 4th floor. The building directory had told her everything she needed to know about Miguel Santos, night janitor, employee for over 2 decades, model worker with perfect attendance. She found them in the corner office, Miguel methodically cleaning windows while Elena worked on homework at a small folding table that looked like it had seen better decades. The softball sat on the windowsill, innocent now, just a piece of sporting equipment rather than the weapon that had saved a life. "Excuse me," Sarah said softly from the doorway. Miguel turned, his face immediately showing the kind of respectful attention he gave to all the executives, though his eyes held something deeper, concern, and perhaps a question about whether she was all right. "Ms. Santos," Sarah said, though she was looking at Elena, who had glanced up from her math homework with curious dark eyes. "I believe you and your daughter saved my life tonight." The silence that followed was heavy with emotion neither the janitor nor the CEO quite knew how to express. Miguel's hands, still holding a cleaning cloth, trembled slightly. We couldn't stand by," he said finally, his accented English carrying the weight of a man who had always believed in doing what was right, regardless of the cost. Sarah walked fully into the room, her presence somehow different from the commanding figure she cut in boardrooms. Here, she was simply a woman grateful to be alive, speaking to a father who had raised a daughter brave enough to act when it mattered most. "Elena," she said, crouching down to the girl's eye level. "That was the most courageous thing I've ever seen. And the best throw." Elena smiled. The first real expression of her age they'd seen all evening. "I play softball," she said simply, as if hurling projectiles from 4 stories to save strangers was just another Tuesday night activity. Sarah laughed then, a sound bubbling up from relief and admiration and the kind of joy that comes from witnessing the very best of human nature. "Would you like to play for a better team? With better equipment? Maybe with a college scholarship in your future?" The offer hung in the air like a promise, like the beginning of dreams neither Miguel nor Elena had dared voice. There's a Sterling Corporation scholarship fund, Sarah continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. Full ride to any university, plus funding for athletic programs. I think I know the perfect candidate. Miguel's eyes filled with tears he was too proud to shed in front of his boss. Elena looked between her father and the woman she'd saved, understanding with the wisdom of someone who had learned early that life could change in an instant. Sometimes for the worse, but tonight, miraculously, for the better. I don't know how to thank you, Sarah said, standing and extending her hand to Miguel. He took it in both of his calloused palms speaking of decades of honest work, of sacrifice, of the kind of character that raises heroes. You just did, he said simply. As Sarah left that night, she carried with her more than gratitude. She carried a renewed faith in the goodness that exists in ordinary people, in the power of split-second decisions to change everything, and in the truth that heroism doesn't always wear a cape, sometimes it wears work clothes and carries a softball. Elena returned to her homework, but her future had fundamentally shifted. Miguel returned to his cleaning, but his heart was fuller than it had been in years. And somewhere in the city, 3 predators had learned that even in dark alleys, guardian angels sometimes watch from 4th-floor windows, armed with athletic equipment and righteous purpose. The next morning's newspaper would carry a small story about an attempted assault downtown, but it would miss the real story, the one about a janitor who taught his daughter to throw with precision and act with courage, about a CEO who recognized heroism in unexpected places, and about the moment when 2 lives intersected to prove that kindness, courage, and perfect aim can indeed change the world, one throw at a time.